Nancy Schick of Third Ear Conflict Resolution, and I realized yesterday, you may have seen my post that, yeah, it's not actually the third Thursday, it's the fourth Thursday because we got a bonus Thursday this month, but we are doing our Third Ear Thursday webinar right now. And so I want to introduce you to Mark Bullock, the co-founder of VideoSocials. And I know Mark because I'm in one of his home clubs, and that you see my weekly videos that I do with VideoSocials. So I invite you to come as a guest if you want to check it out. We have a lot of fun in there, and we learn a lot from Mark and the other professionals in it. So Mark, why don't you introduce yourself and maybe even tell why you ended up here with me today?
I see. You're trying to trick me into it. No, my name is Mark Bullock. I'm the co-founder of VideoSocials.net. I'm also the co-founder of VideoInterviewPodcast.com. And I'm a recovering introvert and who is on video continuously. Basically, VideoSocials is a community of people like you and I that get together and create our videos together and learn from each other and give feedback to each other and have a safe place to practice, experiment, learn before things go out live like this is. So
yeah, this is new, right? This is new.
Yeah.
Not have it recorded, not have an opportunity to fix the lighting a little bit differently,
right.
edit it, anything else that we might want to do. So I appreciate you taking a chance on a live stream with me.
If I'm not prepared by now, 1,000 videos in, I'm never going to be. So
yeah, and we'll dive in just a second. But I also want to just mention that for those of you that aren't familiar with Mark or VideoSocials or me and haven't watched my other videos, you can definitely do that. We each have YouTube channels, so you can go and find both of us. Mark also has a podcast, and I've been on his podcast. But you'll see that I am all like Mark. I'm not a video person, or I wasn't, I should say. I guess I have become a video person because I've been in VideoSocials for, I believe it's been almost 6 years now. So yeah, so I've definitely improved. You can get a good laugh by going to my early videos on my YouTube channel. But that's not why we're here. We're here to talk about something that came up in one of our meetings, because we talk about all kinds of things if we have time in the hour that we're there to record our videos. And Mark and I got into this conversation about why we should stop using the term human resources. So tell me where that came from, and we'll dive right in.
So without getting too deep into it, I've been doing a lot of learning and a lot of study over the last several months as the world seems to be turning upside down. And both in the, how do we take VideoSocials to the next level? Because we discovered community. We understand what that means and how powerful those relationships are. And I keep coming back to, democracy, socialism, capitalism, all this stuff. And I'm studying all of it because I've never really paid that much attention to it. And one of the things that just comes back for me, and this leads into the term human resources, it comes back to, for me, what's missing. And what's missing is what we used to have that we don't anymore, which is actual real life communities. It exists in small pockets. VideoSocials is one of those small pockets where people we get to know, like, trust, enjoy, engage with, gain perspective from our relationships and our conversations with others. And in this world of social media, in this world of contentious political positioning, in this world of the extreme wealthy deciding that, they need more, so they've got to take it from those that, have less. I looked at what is the root of all this? What what is missing, and what's missing is community, and at the heart of community is relationships, and the heart of relationships is conversations, right? And so the term came up in this conversation that we were having of human resources, and my daughter was in human resources for a while, and she went to a couple of different companies, increasingly progressive, supposedly, on their HR departments. She was in the HR departments, and then she finally just said that's enough of that, and now she's an adoption specialist for a local shelter, and, so, and she's living her best life.
Yeah.
And then you had brought it up, and it's like, I can think of nothing more dehumanizing than to categorize people as resources for a company, because we're so much more than that. Yes, everything is a resource for a company, but that's a one-way thing. It's like, the mining that we do, the tree that we cut down, the oil that we pull out of the ground, et cetera, they're all resources. They're, obviously natural resources that we then, and then we have the machinery that we put it together with, modify it, et cetera, et cetera. That's not what human beings are, right? Human beings are there to contribute if they're able to contribute, and they're encouraged to contribute, and they feel that they're valued for contributing. But we've got to get away from this top down, I own the company, or I'm, CEO, or I'm on the board, or I'm a stockholder, et cetera, and the employees are just there as resources. Yeah. So yeah. I don't know what term. I've done some research on AI. I've, thought about it a little bit. There's lots of different things that we could call it. I'm not saying that it needs to be, team management, or because almost all of them seem to be missing something. Because it's not just a team, right? So it's
and it's not a family.
and it's not a family, but it is a group of people that are in relation with each other, and in relation with the customers and clients, and in relation with the owners and the management. And it seems like in the corporate world, especially, and the pure capitalism kind of world, that we've gotten away from the powers that be, the owners, the stockholders, et cetera, seem to want to be divorced from any relationship with the people that work for them, work with them. Even that language is a little bit, it's like, as soon as you say they work for, you're also limiting it.
And it has an impact, right? We know this about, like, language has an impact. So when you're saying you work for me, right, then that immediately puts in my mind, even if I'm not intending it to be that, it puts that in my mind that you're subservient to me in some way. You're lesser than I am. And that's not what we're trying to create. And that's really why we started this conversation, right? Because I'm writing my second book, and I'm addressing some of these topics. So I definitely agree with you. That was one of the reasons that I wanted to get into this conversation, because I think we need to start thinking differently about the language. And I did some research preparing for today on the history of human resources. How did we get to that term? And look, in one way, it's better than, personnel, human capital. I believe it was called welfare office at one point, right? And these were, very early on. The fact that we were even looking at it, it started when women came into the workplace and they were going into manufacturing jobs. So, in one way, we've made progress. I acknowledge that, but I think what we're getting into is that now we're evolving. The way we work has evolved. way that we're so interconnected. Like, we've always had somewhat of a global economy. Maybe not everybody was participating in it, right? We didn't
Right.
know about everybody the way we know now. But I think we have to start looking at where we are now as a world culture that's so interconnected. And yeah, let's explore some of the new ways of expressing that and inviting people to participate in employment as a partnership, as I like to say.
Employment as a partnership. I like that. So yeah, I the and Lee says, you know, power over versus power with, and yes, it's like one of the things that, you know, and I know we both have been involved in, we all have honestly been involved in multiple communities in our lifetimes. I have a military background. I was in a community of people, and by the way, that forced me into something that I was uncomfortable with. That forced me into um, working with people that I didn't have a lot of experience with, who hadn't been around, and it all different backgrounds, all different religious beliefs, all different ethnicities, et cetera, et cetera. And but you know, for a common cause, and under, you know, the it's not the thumb of, but you know, being you're basically your property of the United States government when you're in the military. But you develop relationships with people that you thought you didn't have anything in common with. And you start to see the power and what's possible by being willing to step out of your comfort zone a little bit and to step into, you know, just because somebody has a different perspective than mine, it's not necessarily wrong. As a matter of fact, it just may be different. And if I can see their perspective and they can see my perspective, we might be able to blend those two perspectives into something that is much more powerful, right? And if an employer or a corporate, you know, entity looks down on their people, they're losing out on the opportunity to understand those perspectives. And how many people have been, and I've been an employee, I've been a government employee, I've been government property, like I said, in the military, and I've been an employer multiple times across multiple companies, and I've always cherished, I don't want people involved in the organization that aren't willing to contribute to it. And I've always felt for myself that, you know, a certain sense of responsibility to not only guide and train and manage and that kind of stuff, but to look at people as whole human beings,
Right.
Understanding that they have families and they have their challenges and they have and they have the things that they're up against in life, and you know, those of us who are parents also has some pretty deep understanding that when, you know, kids come first, right? You know, so yeah, I don't know where you want to go. But I'm willing to go there just to explore, you know, that it's something more than the people that work for you are a resource to you.
Yeah.
And you have to provide them a pay and benefit package that is the minimum that you can get away with to have them participate. You're missing the whole, as far as I'm concerned, you're missing the whole point at that point.
Well, I think that's something that I struggle a lot with, as I'm writing my book and I'm researching different companies and I'm looking at what are some good models. And I keep coming back to just this sinking feeling of, how can you live with yourself when you have multiple homes and most of your employees can't afford their own apartment, right? And I don't understand that. And that's something that I'm having to be confronted with. And I think that's a part of being a good leader also, is recognizing that just because you don't understand something doesn't mean that you shouldn't consider it, It's not that
Right.
I'm saying I want to consider treating my employees poorly, but the only way to find solutions is to, pretty much look head on into the problem, right? And so it's been really interesting to explore that. And by the way, I see that we've had a couple of people come on, and if you all want to share some of your ideas, you can put them in the chat. We want engagement with this because we're in this together. We're trying to create some new options. I don't think, for example, that corporations need to go away. We need them for certain things. Like, I'm not going to develop my own high-rise company. I'm not going to build skyscrapers. I'm not sure we need them anymore, but let's just say for right now, we might still need them. And so I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to develop affordable housing. I don't know how to do that. That's not my skill set. And sometimes we need larger organizations that have the infrastructure to get some things done. So I don't think we have to go, oh, all of them need to go away. But I think this is in the book that I'm writing currently, it's about having different blueprints, not always following the same thing. I think part of what may be happening is that we don't have a lot of other blueprints. I can keep going back to that, but we don't have a lot of other plans for how do you build something different. We have people out there starting organizations, right, that are doing that. We have B Corps, we have conscious capitalists. We have a lot of groups.
Mhm.
There's an Impact NYC chapter that is also looking at how do we kind of align with the UN Sustainable Development Goals and build
Mhm.
a sustainable organization that does what I want to do as well, is, be able to develop your people, give back to your communities, recognize that your communities are a big part of why you exist. How many of us have gone into stores or restaurants or done business online with somebody that we're just a number to them? You can't even find a phone number to call if you need customer service. And we've been trained to kind of accept that. And I think employees have unfortunately been trained to accept less than. But I want to create a new option.
And so as we're looking at creating that option, I think we would be remiss if we didn't start talking a little bit about AI as well.
Right.
Because AI is, and many of the organization and corporate leaders are looking at AI to even further isolate and prevent from having to deal with the relationships with people, right? So, because the fact of the matter is, whatever they say it's going to replace jobs.
Mhm.
It's going, many jobs. It's in some ways, when it comes to solving technical problems and things like that, it's going to, we have to assume it's going to be faster, it's going to be smarter, et cetera, et cetera. But it cannot take into account and does not have that which only human beings have, which is a heart and empathy and a look towards an engagement with my actions or inactions affect others, right? Because in an organization, in a company, I mentioned it earlier, but we've had people join since. If you have a group of employees, you have a community.
Right.
It is a community. It may not be functioning very well. There may be a lot of contention, and I know that a lot of your work is around helping people work through those contentions, those conflicts, et cetera, et cetera. But the vast majority of that, I can't help but think, could be avoided if everybody recognized that this is a community of, yes, diverse. No, it's not a bad word. Diverse people with diverse, different belief systems, different cultural backgrounds, different ethnicities, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And that none of that is not valid. Right. So, yeah.
And I think that's the other part of it, is slowing down and recognizing that, right?
Hmm.
It's interesting. I think some of this because we're struggling with it a little bit more in the US because we've become so service-based in our businesses. We're more intellectual capital, right?
Mhm.
We
Yep.
have more knowledge work that we've developed an economy that's heavily dependent upon that. And I know there's some movement to change that. But to your point about the AI, I think plenty of people would tell you this too, that the days of bringing manufacturing back, you're going to be probably bringing manufacturing jobs back that robots will eventually take. So it's not really going to change the economy that much. And you've probably heard me because I think
Oh,
I've done some videos on this, right? That
and just to interject right in that point, they aren't going to build a manufacturing facility that is going to be robotic and design it initially for people to be the operator, right? It's they're
you're
going to
right.
bring
It's going to be built in the other way around.
if somebody's going to spend if a company decides to spend billions of dollars and 5 to 10 years of zoning and laws and the investments that are required and putting in a manufacturing facility, and I'm not going to mention names right now,
Right.
but there's
Don't
a
need
really
to.
big one that's in the news recently that's moving from China to India, and that's upsetting the powers that be. No, move it back into the United States. They can't move it back into the United States because when the parts that they can't roboticize were 10 times the cost for people, and there's nothing wrong with that. This is the thing that I want to get to, and want us to realize that AI is about efficiency, and there's great potential and usefulness in AI for research and for a number of other things. But when we start replacing people with AI, we're not only taking away those potential jobs, but we're decimating the community that they're involved with. So there is such a thing as trying to be too efficient, right?
Yeah, and I think, I'm again that I've been involved in these AI conversations, especially with how they're going to influence the way that we work going forward. So we're gonna continue on this because I don't think we can have these conversations without addressing AI. And I think there's as any new tool is developed. We saw it with the internet, right? We've seen it with the dark web. We've seen it with cryptocurrency. Everything that comes out that has potential to do good, somebody always gets a hold of it that will turn it into something that wasn't intended. And we just have to accept that that's the way humans work, right? I work with them to not function that way in the world, but not everybody wants to work with me, and not everybody wants to function in the world that way. So what we're talking to are the people that are here, that will watch this. You're
Mhm.
interested enough because you're wondering what else is out there. And so I like to think of AI in this context as being able to take some of those repetitive tasks away from us that we don't like anyway. We check out on them, and that we can cause a lot of harm because our brains are just bored with them, and
Right,
we're doing multiple things at once. So I think the AI has a lot of potential there to help us out, right? But then it still comes back to the jobs are going to disappear. So what do we do with that? We keep talking in my world about how the soft skills, I don't like soft skills, but that's what we're calling them. That's empathy, conflict resolution, etc. Which, by the way, I'm pretty sure you learned some of these skills in the military. So
right.
why they're considered soft and feminine, I don't understand, right? But you learn these skills, and I think they're going to become more and more important because the robots can't do that. And the problem with this that I foresee, it could be good news for me because I do these kinds of trainings, right?
Right.
But people are going to have to learn them. I invite people to learn them, one, because I know it's going to give you more opportunities in the workplace, but also it has so much potential to translate into other areas of your life. These are great life skills that make your life better, right? And
Yeah,
so, that's why I find this whole conversation really interesting, because human resources, the best human resources departments are still offering these types of trainings and programs. But I wouldn't have so much legal work if I didn't know that they're failing in other areas.
absolutely.
And it
Absolutely.
may come down to something as simple as what started this conversation is, are we still saying human resources and claiming to be more focused on individuals and developing and employment as partnership, but maybe the term is still setting the tone for the culture, which is humans are just resources in business. And when they've lost their value, they're like any other piece of machine, they just go out in the junkyard. And that's what we want to stop.
Or not even completely losing their value. It's just their value is diminished because there's something else, either younger or AI or or better trained, becomes available for a lower number, right? Um, and yes, there is a tendency by human beings to resist change, and so we do have a lot of people that work with organizations that they kind of want to get settled into what they're doing, and they don't really enjoy learning that much, and don't want to evolve. And yes, so there's it's a given it's a give and take. The company has to move forward, the products and services that they offer have to move forward, and so everybody in the organization needs to be able to move forward with them, and towards that common goal. But again, if you don't have relationships with people, then you're trying to dictate, okay, we're going here, follow us or leave, and we'll bring in something to
Well,
replace.
and we all know that there has to be some sort of incentive. And that's the other part of it, is that, I think for the longest time, we were just looking at, okay, pay is your
Mhm.
incentive. You need money, we'll give you pay, right? In exchange for your labor. That's what it is. We forget that that is a mutually beneficial agreement. But as workers have become more educated, and that's not just formal education, but we have more access to information via the internet than ever before, right? And I think we're seeing that as well, that employees are recognizing that they have more options, that they're not stuck, they can demand more, and they are demanding more, or they're just not going to come work for you. Like,
Right.
and if you want just a bunch of people that are desperate, then the other thing about that is they are going to leave at some point too, the moment that they wake up. So it's like, when that old control model,
Right.
it fails at always at some point, because your employees will always at some point recognize their value. And if you don't recognize it first and preserve that relationship, they will be gone. And over time, you're, especially with social media and all the different ways that we communicate, you're going to lose your reputation, you're going to lose your clients. You're
Right.
right. This is what we're seeing repeatedly. I mean, look at what's been happening with Target just by taking down their DEI program, right? And people
Yeah.
said, no, that's not what we want. We came to you because we thought you stood for something different. And so, employers, this is also your invitation to start really looking at the nuances, just like you do when you're determining your target market, your ideal client profile. It's the same kind of effort that we need to be putting into our employees.
Agreed. I'm kind of reading through Matt's statement and question here,
Oh,
and
I'm so sorry,
and
Matt. I didn't realize you put a comment in there.
and he's talking about the tension between trying to humanize workspaces, and the legal fiduciary responsibility of the officers to deliver profits. Well, therein is, I think tension's a polite word for that, because, and maybe conscious capitalism is part of the answer to that. I personally think that we still do, live in a democracy, and there's a lot to be said one way or the other, but capitalism is going to collapse in on itself if it keeps putting profit before people,
Right.
like consistently, and that's all that's all there is.
Just
right?
like any other economic system that's been
Right.
implemented.
Right.
Absolutely.
There has to be profit. The company has to move forward. Yes, but as you were kind of alluding to earlier, I question: does society, as in the global society, need multi-billionaires? Right. So
I question that too.
I question allowing the influence that comes from that's available to that. So in answer to your question, Matt, is I can't answer the whole question, but I know that there's components to it that I think are important. One is allowing large corporations and more importantly, the people that own and manage and hold power over those corporations to also influence what are supposed to be the representatives of the people, right? Who are making the laws and or breaking the laws and or changing the laws in favor of a corporate entity, which in the United States is a person and has the same rights as a person,
but doesn't have the same
but
responsibilities.
doesn't.
Can't go to
Right.
jail.
Right. So I forget the exact phrase. I've heard it a lot recently, but they socialize their failures and they capitalize and keep their successes, right?
Right.
Government bailouts, as an example, for during the financial crisis, et cetera. As long as we put capitalism and these corporations at the top of the food chain, at the top of our list of the most important things in the world, we put that above human existence and the value of human beings. I don't see how we don't. I was listening to a podcast last night, and they were talking about, it's like the game of Monopoly, right? Once they get to a certain point, they own all of the property, they own all the intellectual property, all the rights, all the, they own the politicians, they own they own everything. They get to make the rules, right? And so it's time to flip the board. Well, if we flip the board, we're going to have an incredible catastrophic event, humanitarian. So we can't really flip the board, but we do have to find a way to get to the mindset of the individuals that are not currently looking at or considering the masses of human beings that they're affecting with their decisions to maximize profit. To it's not just multiple homes, it's yachts and airplanes and bunkers, et cetera, and ultimately I think they have apocalyptic thinking. It's like they're already planning for the fall of civilization, and they just want to survive to be able to pick up the pieces afterwards. That's how obscene is that.
And some of the, I see that as a certain level of sadness also, right?
Tremendous.
And that's another part of it that I talk about frequently, and I'm pretty sure we'll address in the book as well, is that it's also this, there's evidence that there is a certain type of maybe I'm trying to find a very kind way to say it, but look, there are studies that say that there are narcissistic personality disorders and other psychological diagnoses or psychiatric diagnoses that you might be able to make with certain people who rise to those levels. And I see that as I see probably most of the world, a problem to solve, right? Is I don't think that most of the leaders that are pursuing that are pursuing it because that's making them happy. It's learned behavior, survival behavior, which is not at all surprising to me that someone would then be investing in a bunker and having okay, apocalyptic. There we go.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
having all kinds of problems with words today. Have that kind of thinking. And so I see that. And so, I have to say, in the context of all of this, I'll answer Matt's question about what legal change would I like to see. I think one of the things that would be helpful is to maybe have some sort of law, and I don't know how we would ever get this passed, but I would like to see some sort of law that limits the amount that can be made by some of the corporate leaders. Like, should we really be paying someone millions and millions of dollars per year when their lowest level employee cannot even live on their own? Right? I think we have to
And
look
the,
at
and
that.
the stats I looked at yesterday, I'm not going to remember the exact numbers, but it's somewhere in the neighborhoods in the 60s. The top 300 companies in the United States, the average was around 25 times that of their average employee. It's now 350 times that of their average employee. I'm sorry, that's just greed.
Right. It's
just
disgusting.
straight up greed.
Which brings us back to this whole concept of humans as just resources, like robots or forklifts, right? Or boxes or anything else, right? And I think that's one of the problems with this, is that there's no accountability. We've dehumanized people in that way, which is what we're trying to get into. Is, at the top of this conversation is not that we're saying get rid of HR. What we're saying is, at least what I'm saying, is that HR shouldn't be delegated only to one office, right? Or relegated to one office. This should be just like DEI initiatives. We need to be doing this as in partnership, looking at the mutual benefit. If you can't see it, then you should be tweaking there, right? That's the first thing. If you're seeing that you're getting 300 times benefit, well, somebody's giving you that benefit, right? We tend to think of jobs in this hierarchical way, but we saw this during the pandemic, that people we've never considered essential made our lives work in a way that we took for granted. And here we haven't elevated their salaries. We haven't made it easier for them. And if we had another pandemic, they're the people we're going to be depending on again.
Yes, and the opposite extreme of that is look at the medical professionals that risk their lives trying to right. So, and those who were doing the janitorial services for the hospitals, et cetera, et cetera. It's like, yes, you can say that there's some monetary difference in value because of the cost and the effort and the time and the energy that went in, to become a surgeon versus somebody who is going to empty the trash. But that doesn't make the person who's emptying the trash any less necessary to the process. And there's certainly a lot of talk recently about living wage, right? And I look at that as kind of like the minimum bar.
Yeah.
I honestly have no problem with, somebody becoming wealthy if it's in service of others,
right,
not at the expense of others.
And
And
I know that there's at least one person on here that would feel that way as well. And I know, Tevis, you and I have talked about that a lot of, and several people in our circles, is we want people that have more of a community mind, a mindset and a community focus to be in that conversation and have the money, right? Because we can be trusted with it. And unfortunately, I think what we're seeing is the people that we're elevating to these high levels aren't vibrating in the same world we are. They're not living in the same world we are. And even when they go into it with the best intentions, in my research, I was reading about Sam Bankman-Fried,
Mhm.
that just went to jail, I believe, for about the cryptocurrency scam. He originally wanted to be an environmentalist, and
Mhm.
people told him to go make money because he'd be able to give back more. And this is the other part of the whole process, is we're still human beings, right? And if we don't have the right people around us, including our employees and including where we work, then we end up getting off track, and we can end up going completely in the opposite
Right.
direction. And that's just human nature. So we have to have more of these support systems that hold things in place. And government was supposed to put those bumpers around around things,
Well,
right?
and this is something that Matt makes in his most recent part here is that that it's the interdependence of a truly robust and healthy democracy and creating a regulatory environment that gives it individuals agency. And the Green New Deal. After basically, we had the robber barons, we had, the Great Depression, we had World War II, which we managed to stay out of for long enough to start to get back on our feet by selling military equipment and stuff to the rest of the world. And then we got into it, and then the whole rest of the world was destroyed. Right. All of Europe was destroyed, and we're the only ones left standing. And so we became the superpower of the world using capitalism. But we had this is where minimum wage came from. This is the 40-hour work week. Social Security came out of is it LBJ, right? So, in his first 100 days, by the way, that entire term came from because of all of that he got done in that first 100 days. And there was other things that he did that weren't so great, right? But nobody's perfect, and the issue that I see though is that exactly that. How exactly do we expect something's going to happen if somebody has unlimited money, unlimited power, and unlimited use of natural resources, and there's no check or balance against that? There are narcissists in the world. There are greedy people in the world. There are evil people in the world.
And there always have been, and there always will be.
Always have been, and there always will be, right? So that's, for me, that's the purpose of the state. In this case, the United States government is to serve the people, right? And yes, the wealthy are the people. I'm not trying to take anything away from that, but why are we? I mean, this.
It goes beyond HR.
I was going to say I don't want to go too far down the politics thing, but the politics is that's happening now is the symptomology of the mindset of getting away from understanding that companies are organizations of communities of people that are in relationship with each other, in relationship with your clients, in relationship with your customers, and should be in relationship with the ownership of and the control of that company, right? And I'm not talking about going as far necessarily as full on socialism,
Right.
where the state owns everything. That's I don't think that would work to begin with. Second
But
of
you
all,
still need people to run things, and
you
whenever
still
people are running it, it's gonna
exactly.
be a mess.
So I'm not, I'm not saying that we should, consider, communism or any of that kind of stuff. But we need to be responsible, right? And if people climb that ladder and gain that kind of authority, who are not going to be willing to be responsible, we need to hold them responsible. In other words, to be accountable, not just to their planes and their rocket ships and their and their bunkers and their and stuff, but to the fact that they are citizens of the planet, citizens of the world, citizens of this country, and their fellow citizens, not just that's another thing is that we've gotten away from teaching basic civics.
Yeah, and basic critical thinking and
Oh, big
mutual
time.
respect
Yeah.
and all of the things that we need to function in community, right? That's exactly it. And I'm looking at Tavis's comment from earlier about this, and I know the world that she's in. I was in human resources before I became a lawyer, and I agree that there's a they're in kind of this sandwich role, right? They're in the
Right.
middle of where they're given a lot of expectation, but not a lot of authority. And some of that comes down to this same idea that humans are just a resource, and they're a resource that's not as valuable as money. And that's a conversation that I think we want to flip. So I actually love what you suggested, Tevis, which is perhaps it's chief stakeholder officer, something
Right.
along those lines that says we're looking at all the human elements here, and that's including the environmental impact of our business and how it plays out in our communities. And when we destroy individuals in the work, we also destroy the people around them, and it has far-reaching impact. And I think some companies are aware of that, and they're coming on board with this concept, but there's a movement, I guess, I'm trying to start. And
And
thank you for those who are in this movement with me and on this with.
yeah, and I think there's a lot of movements that need to start, right? And I've been researching a lot, what is grassroots, right? So grassroots is, few people coming together, having conversations like this. It grows, other people get involved. Another group will start up, on a different topic. So, it doesn't necessarily need to be one conglomerate of solve all the world's problems, right? But whatever we have knowledge and influence over, that we can see that, okay, let's flip the script, as it were, not flip the game table, but flip the script a little bit on something as simple as, let's kind of bring it back full circle, something as simple as, should we be using the term human resources? Right? What else could we use instead of that? And what other terms are we using in our capitalistic controlled society and in our companies that are dehumanizing,
Right.
as well as or just undervaluing, right? So and look, I'm a business owner, and I don't mind telling you, it ain't easy, right? It's and you are taking the risk, and it's and I'm right now I'm in the role of the head of HR, right? So it's there's nothing easy about it. Human relationships are messy. Human relationships are malleable, and there's give and take is insufficient phrase, right? It's a dance. It's and it's a conversation, and it's a negotiation, and it's it's a lot of things. But when deadlines are there and the bills have got to get paid and payroll's got to be made, and and it's easy to say, I can't deal with this soft problem right now.
Right.
Right. But you have to.
And I can tell you, it's not a soft problem when, for example, the average EEO claim will
Right.
go for about $48,000. So, you know, that's in some places, that's somebody's annual salary, right? And so, you know, when you start looking at it from that standpoint is, yes, it's rather unlikely that most businesses will have claims. They'll have a few over the course of the business, the longer you're in business. But when you have them, first of all, it's very expensive. And second, it was almost always resolvable with a simple conversation. And
Yeah,
so then,
and disruption, because that's the other thing, because even if you look at, okay, well, there's a settlement or what, you know, there's a fine or whatever the case may be. Yeah, that's a direct financial impact, but the impact of losing that person as a resource, having to replace that person as a resource, get that person trained and up to speed and, you know, and productive, right? Whereas, wouldn't it have been just easier to have, as you said, have a conversation,
right,
right? To
right.
treat them like a human being,
Right, because it's
you know?
but part of the reason people don't have those conversations is they don't feel skilled in them. I know that's part of it, right? Which is also why I keep calling on employers. I know Tevis, you work with, and Matt, you work with businesses on this. We all work with businesses on this, and I think this is what we're being tasked with at this point. And I see, yeah, the comments. Lee, I think, has already gone, but made a comment about, yeah, how many businesses say our people are our most valuable resource. That's not how you treat them. And
That's a platitude, not you know, not a declaration.
right. And it's like so many of the statements, you know, in the
Yep.
DEI world that have been pulled down, they were what we call performative. And look, there'll be a whole chapter on this probably in my book, and it's the human psychology of it. And I think that's a big part of it as well, is like recognizing that the labels we put on things have an impact. The Yes, you can put that statement out there, but if it's the actions that back it up that really tell what your culture's about. The
Right.
data will tell you so many different things than what you're saying. And that's in my own life as well. And so as leaders, I think we have to constantly be looking within, right? We have to
Mhm.
look for our own biases. We have to look at the way that we're responding to things. And all with this, as Tevis, when she was on my webinar a few months ago, said, it's about looking at the we. So
Right.
we've done a lot of work on me, what's in me. We've done a lot of work on what you do over there, but nobody's really talking about, well, nobody was talking about, or very few people were talking about, what does it look like when it's we? How do we come together? And it's because you have to look in both directions constantly. And yes, it's hard, but
Yep.
the payoff is huge.
And I don't know that anybody's really done it. Right. I'm not. I mean, there are some organizations that are, you know, considered, I think, more progressive, et cetera. And but it's, you know, I again on the same podcast, I was hearing, you know, that democracy there's never been a pure democracy in the world.
Right.
There's never been a pure socialist, you know, political structure in the world. There's never been a pure communism, and there's never been pure capitalism.
Right.
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 It's always a blend of things, and ultimately a corruption of those things that takes us aside. I think what we're saying is that put human beings at the center of that,
Right.
of whatever the solution is going to be. And I like your, you know, you're talking about that it's we.
Yeah.
It's us. It's not us and them. It's us. It's we. It's, we need to work together to figure this out. We need to talk, to have these conversations.
Yeah, and I've done so much conversation about this idea that we promote in the world, in mainstream media, in movies and television, of being, self-made millionaire, self-made billionaire now, and I'm sure they're looking at the next self-made trillionaire. None of those are self-made. Every single one of them. Otherwise, you wouldn't have employees in the first place, right?
Rugged individualism,
Right.
and it's like there is no getting by on your own.
Yeah.
Right? I am not self-made.
No.
Right?
No.
I would fit the definition of it, but I don't consider myself self-made because I did it with thousands of conversations with thousands of people, and probably more than 100, people that have worked with me and for me, and I've worked for, et cetera, et cetera. I could not. None of us is an island unto ourselves.
Right. Right.
We can't grow our own food, provide our own medical, our own.
Right. We need the sun, we need rain, we need soil, right? And so, yeah, I want to point out, like, Lee and Tevis are both in this conversation too. And Tevis, I'm assuming that's Martin Buber's, or Buber, a book, I, Thou, Here, Now. And then Lee also commenting that, yeah, the saying he's been, I guess maybe a mantra, is that we need
Right.
to move from a me society to a we society. And I think we should also include in that this moving from a you, because there's a lot of conversation right now in the world, all around me, is that the problem is over there with you. If you change, my life gets better. It's like, how did we end up back there?
Yeah, I think there's so many things that it's like I thought we were evolving from that already. I thought we,
And I think some of it is this, look, it's people that look like me, right? It's people that look like you that have gotten very accustomed to the world being a certain way and have felt threatened, and then have responded in a way that's trying to make the world go back to something that really didn't exist before, right? For most,
it never.
right, it didn't, like,
No.
we're trying to live in a TV sitcom or something, right? Like, we're going to go back to Leave It to Beaver or Ozzie and Harriet. Those were television shows that didn't actually exist for most people. It would be lovely if it did. Maybe, I don't know, right? It's like that, and I think there's something in that we have to be constantly checking ourselves. And I was in a conversation with someone about that because I'm doing a DEI series to educate people and help them navigate all of the changes around that. And look, it happens to the best of us, right? No matter how well trained we are, we're still human beings. We get triggered, right? And the thing is knowing that you do it. And I realized we are at the top of the hour. Wow. At 3:30, I thought we were going to be like, okay, Mark, we're done. We don't have anything else to talk about. But thank you all
Thank you for the questions and comments, because it's been.
And I'm sorry I didn't see them earlier. I so appreciate all of you. And this was powerful. If you have other ideas, please, share them with me. You all can't see the comments. I'm sorry about that. I think in some places you might be able to see them, but either way, this has been recorded. I will put it on our YouTube channel. You'll see some clips from it. And some of these comments, I can see them, so they're probably going to inspire some of my future webinars and the development of my book. So stay tuned. And in the meantime, of course, keep listening with your third ear. For those hurt, you can heal.